Welcome to the second episode of the D-LENS Mentorship Series. In this episode, I'll be talking about how to make a discovery in science, medicine, and technology. I'll begin the presentation with a brief story. In November 2022, a devastating flood struck Bayelsa State, which is situated in the south-south part of the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Many houses were submerged, and the flood significantly disrupted the socio-economic livelihoods of the majority of the population. Both rural and urban areas were equally impacted, and many people were displaced from their homes into refugee camps, and for those who could afford it, into hotels. I was also affected by the flood, and at one point the flood water started accumulating in my house, leading us to consider relocating. Fortunately, flood water eventually receded. During that time, I pondered why we haven't found a direct solution to the flooding challenge beyond merely waiting for it to recede or improving drainage. I wondered if we could develop a machine to evaporate flood water and create dry land. When I shared this idea, some laughed at me, others claimed that it was not possible, and one person argued that it could create a vicious cycle. Evaporation will lead to more floods, resulting in more rain and flooding. But despite their doubts, I remained intrigued and decided to explore the idea further. So I went to Google and typed, "Is it possible to evaporate flood water during floods?" There were varied responses from different websites, and what I have done here is to categorize these responses into 4 thematic areas. The first says that these are the facts, make up your mind. Here I learned a lot about evaporation and flooding, and even realized that we do not necessarily need heat for water to boil and evaporate. The second group said, yes, it is possible, but there are consequences. Ultimately, it gives you information that discourages you. The third group said, although it's possible, it's not practicable, stick to the convention. And what is the convention in this case? Improve drainage and wait for the flood water to recede. The fourth group said, it is not possible, don't even try it. I've shared this story as a figurative example of the early phases of the journey of discovery. The message behind the story will become obvious as we proceed with this presentation. In November 2023, I was invited by the Black Immunology Society to give a keynote, and the topic I selected was the scientist and the concept of why. The concept of why is a phrase I coined myself, and it reflects my thinking in my professional academic journey. It's the way I teach undergraduate and postgraduate students, the way I conduct research, and the way I see patients on the bedside. It's all about being curious about everything, asking why not, and what if. In that presentation, I noted that we humans were born as scientists. Children between the ages of 1 to 2 years have the innate ability to explore their environment. They are inquisitive about everything and use their senses to understand what is around them. When, for instance, they sight an object, they explore and conduct experiments like scientists do. They touch, they feel, smell and taste the object, and even try to insert the object in every space they can see or feel, including spaces on their body. By gathering information about their environment, they decide like scientists do about what to avoid and what to embrace. When they get older, at about the age of 3 years, they begin to ask questions about everything in the environment, including what they see, what they hear, and what they are told. They ask their parents various why questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do I have to go to school? Why are you taller than daddy? These questions are asked from an innocent mind, a mind free of preconceptions and expectations, prejudices and judgments, what I call a beginner's mindset. It's an empty mind full of curiosity, wonder, and amazement. A mind that is open to all possibilities and that can see things as they are and not the way the world has defined things. Unfortunately, by the age of 7 years, most children stop asking questions and instead focus on answers. They learn and adopt what I call the classroom mindset, also called the conventional, unimaginative mindset. This mindset is focused on outcomes and payoffs and not on costs. Instead of questioning for costs, they focus on answers and apply conventional methods to get answers. Consequently, they create nothing new but just repeat the old. Unfortunately, most adults live with a conventional mindset. We take action to conform and remain traditional. In that presentation, I talked about the several reasons why we have adopted an answer mindset, why we have lost our imaginative mind, our divine gift as scientists. We focus on the answer mindset because it's easier not to ask questions that take us out of our comfort zone. We are discouraged by the society, by our parents, by our teachers and friends to stop asking questions. Tradition, culture, and religion has indoctrinated us to focus only on the facts and not to dare to challenge the established norm. We are afraid of asking questions because we do not want to offend, challenge perceived authority, to be misinterpreted or to be wrong. When we have questions to ask, we fail to ask them because we lack the trust in the society's ability to support the inquiry process, or lack the capacity to answer the questions we intend to ask. So we become paralyzed in a conventional mindset, always trying to conform to status quo and to do what others have done. Having established this foundation, I would like to tell us the stories, mindsets, and lessons from discoverers and innovators. This is intended to inspire us to become discoverers ourselves and to equip us with the skills, attitude, and aptitudes required to accelerate our journey in becoming discoverers, innovators, and inventors, especially in the field of science, medicine, and technology. Let me start with the story of the Wright brothers, who were the first to pioneer the first sustained air flight. The Wright brothers, Wilbur and Obie Wright, were Americans. They were children of a clergyman from a middle-income household. The story has it that during their childhood, they were fascinated by a toy helicopter given to them by their father. This fascination was what inspired their interest in the field of aeronautics. They didn't have the opportunity to complete their college education because of health and family-related challenges. However, their parents gave them the opportunity to express their creativity. They had developed a lot of technical skills that enabled them to establish a printing and bicycle making and repair shop. They were avid readers, and in view of their interest in aeronautics, they read widely about the topic, reflecting on stories about how many inventors have tried and failed to create a flying machine that can achieve a sustained air flight. Prior inventors of flying machines were able to lift the aircraft but could not control it while in flight and were unable to sustain the air flight. The Wright brothers therefore wanted to be the first to create a flying machine that could achieve a sustained air flight. Learning from the experiences of other inventors, they got to work, and for a period of about 7 years, using their technical skills and completely funded by their bicycle making shop, they created several models of flying machines and tested several iterations of air flights, failing many times but never giving up. In 1903, in an isolated field in the United States of America, the Wright brothers successfully tested their first sustained, heavier-than-air 3-axis controlled air flight, becoming the first to fly for 36 meters in 12 seconds. This pioneering flight was witnessed by 5 other persons, a photographer who took the picture of the first flight, and 4 other locals who assisted them in their endeavor. They took about 3 to 4 years to patent their invention, but even after this, their invention was not noticed, as it seemed impossible that average men without government funding could invent a true flying machine where others have failed. It took about 5 years after their invention, when they were called for a public demonstration in France, that they gained significant media and public attention, and their invention became well recognized internationally. Their invention ultimately opened the doors for the aviation industry and emphasizes that, amongst many other things, that determination can break barriers on the road to discovery. Let's talk about the discovery of vaccination, which is the story of Edward Jenner, an English physician and scientist. The history of vaccination can be traced back to the 10th century, when variolation was practiced in some parts of Africa and Asia. Variolation is a practice by which a material from a patient with mild smallpox is inoculated into a healthy individual to protect them from severe smallpox and death. In the late 18th century, Edward Jenner observed that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox did not get smallpox. He was curious about this finding, and he went further to conduct an experiment where he infected an 8-year-old boy who was the son of one of his workers, called James Phillips, with cowpox. He later exposed the boy to smallpox and noticed that the boy remained healthy and did not develop smallpox. This was a remarkable finding at that time, as smallpox was a very deadly disease and it caused significant morbidity and mortality across the globe. Jenner called the process vaccination, from the Latin word vacca, which means cow. Jenner conducted several other experiments with many other individuals, trying to prove that cowpox inoculation protected against smallpox. In 1798, he published his findings in a scientific literature. The public and medical community were skeptical. People could not fathom the idea that material from an animal disease could protect humans from disease. But Jenner persisted in his work, and fortunately his findings were corroborated by other scientists, and he gained support and funding from the UK government to expand his work. Today, Jenner is recognized to have laid the foundation for modern immunology without any prior knowledge of the existence of the immune system. His work also led to the eventual eradication of smallpox via vaccination. Jenner's curiosity and his willingness to take calculated risks are important traits for potential discoverers to learn. So let's talk about the discovery of preventive hand hygiene by Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician and obstetrician. Ignaz was working as an assistant physician in the Vienna General Hospital, Austria in the mid-19th century. Here he observed that maternal mortality from puerperal fever, then it was called acute bed fever, was higher in the first clinic or maternity ward manned by physicians and medical students compared to the ward manned by midwives. As against midwives who did not practice in the autopsy rooms, the medical students and physicians often come from the autopsy rooms before to see women in the maternity ward. A colleague of Ignaz had earlier died from the wound he sustained during an autopsy. On account of this, Ignaz then proposed that doctors and medical students were bringing cadaveric particles from the autopsy room, which was causing the disease and deaths amongst women in the first clinic and not in the second clinic. He then instituted hand washing with chlorinated water and made it mandatory for his young doctors and medical students to wash their hands before seeing the women in the wards. This action led to a significant decline in death rate due to puerperal fever, which dropped from 18% to 2%. Unfortunately, the views of Ignaz were not supported by his professors and other senior colleagues and even the medical community at large, because Ignaz had no theoretical basis for his observation, and most physicians felt insulted that Ignaz could suggest that their hands could be a source of disease. Ignaz became greatly depressed due to this resistance he faced and ultimately died in an asylum from a mental illness. He was only recognized for his discovery years after his death. The story of Ignaz Semmelweis tells us that effective communication and patience are important aspects of the discovery process. Tenacity in the face of resistance is an essential quality for discoverers. So let's talk about the discovery of the germ theory of disease. Before the germ theory of disease causation was attributed to several theories. Two of the famous theories at that time was the miasma theory and the theory of spontaneous generation. The miasma theory posited that diseases were caused by bad air, also called miasma, or poisonous air, usually emanating from decaying organic matter. For instance, the image shown here depicts cholera being caused by a noxious vapor circulating in the environment. Miasma theory was first advanced by Hippocrates and was also historically linked to the cause of malaria, Black Death, or bubonic plague, and even cholera. The theory of spontaneous generation proposed that living organisms could arise from non-living matter. Then it was believed that under certain conditions, life could spontaneously emerge from non-living substances. This theory was pioneered by Aristotle and supported by observations of things like maggots appearing on decaying meat or rodents emerging from stored grains. Then it was not known that rodents could infest grains and maggots could contaminate decaying meat. In the early 19th century, English physician and anesthetics John Snow identified a link between cholera and water sources. He published his findings amidst several doubts in the medical community, which suggested that contaminated water could cause cholera. And during the 1854 cholera outbreak in London, he seized the opportunity to gather evidence for his hypothesis. He created a detailed map illustrating the clustering of cholera cases around a specific water pump, which bolstered his theory. After advocating for the removal of the pump's handle, he observed a significant decline in cases. But despite this, the medical community, adhering to the miasma theory, rejected his hypothesis that water could be a source of cholera. John Snow was only recognized after his death as the pioneer of modern epidemiology and early germ theory. Two men were responsible for providing scientific evidence of the germ theory of disease. These men were Louis Pasteur, a French chemist and pharmacist, and Robert Koch, a German physician and microbiologist. Louis Pasteur was the first to discredit the spontaneous generation theory, which through his famous swan neck flask experiment, which showed that microorganisms did not emanate from non-living substances but from air. He was also the first to show the role of microorganisms in fermentation and pasteurization, which was derived from his name. He developed the first attenuated bacterial vaccine used for prevention of anthrax in animals. Robert Koch, on the other hand, was the first to link specific pathogens to specific diseases. For instance, he showed that tuberculosis and cholera were caused by bacterial organisms. He also proposed that the Koch's postulate, which is a set of 4 criteria used to determine whether a specific microorganism is the cause of a particular disease. Let's talk about the man who discovered invisible X-rays. He is Wilhelm Conrad Roentgen, a German engineer and physicist. On the fateful day he made his discovery, he was conducting an experiment in his laboratory with cathode rays, trying to understand how these rays interacted with different objects. He then noticed an unusual glow on a photographic screen a distance away from his cathode tubes. It seemed that the rays from his equipment were penetrating objects and creating images of them on the screen. Intrigued by his finding, he even saw a picture of his own bones when he placed his hands close to the screen. Roentgen tested his observation using various materials and objects, including taking an image of his wife's hand, which revealed her wedding ring and her bones. He published his findings, which immediately became a sensational discovery both for the public and the medical community, although there were few skeptics. His findings were later replicated by others, proving that his observations were not a fluke. In 1901, about 5 years after his discovery, he was awarded the first ever Nobel Prize, which is a Nobel Prize in Physics, for transforming the field of medical imaging. So let's talk about the female scientists who won 2 Nobel Prizes. Marie Curie is a Polish-French physicist and chemist. She was the first to coin the term radioactivity, following her extensive work on the radioactive properties of uranium and thorium, together with her husband Pierre Curie, and based on the foundational work of Henri Becquerel. Marie Curie and her husband later discovered radium in 1898 while they were researching pitchblende. Pitchblende is a mineral that is known to contain a lot of uranium. They found that the pitchblende emitted rays that were more intense than those of uranium alone, indicating the presence of new radioactive elements. The experiments confirmed the existence of 2 new elements, radium and polonium. Polonium is named after her home country, Poland. So she received her first Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903, together with her husband and Henri Becquerel, the other French scientist, for their work on radioactivity. In 1911, after her husband's passing, she again was recognized with the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for discovering and isolating radium, as well as describing the chemical properties of this new element through a very painstaking process. In addition to challenges related to the death of her husband, Maria faced gender bias, and she was denied nomination by the French Academy of Sciences because of her gender. While working with her husband, they had limited funding and had to depend on makeshift equipment to conduct experiments. Maria later passed away from aplastic anemia, which is a consequence of her repeated exposure to radiation. Today, she is recognized for having laid the groundwork for radiotherapy, nuclear physics, and atomic energy. Let's talk about penicillin, the discovery by serendipity. Alexander Fleming was a Scottish physician and microbiologist who accidentally discovered penicillin. He was studying staphylococci and had just returned from vacation when he noticed that his petri dish had been contaminated by a mold. He could have easily discarded the petri dish, but he noticed something unusual. The mold was killing the bacteria, and there was a zone of inhibition around the mold. He was intrigued by this observation, and it seemed as if the mold was producing a substance that killed bacteria on the petri dish. He was able to isolate the mold and realize it was penicillin notatum, and therefore he named the substance produced by this mold penicillin. He published his findings in the literature in 1929, but it received little or no medical attention or attention from the scientific community. However, he also faced significant challenges extracting the penicillin despite several attempts. About 15 years after his observation, 2 other scientists piqued interest in his work, and they were Howard Florey and Boris Chain. And they studied Fleming's discovery, and later on they were able to extract and mass produce the drug penicillin. In 1945, Fleming, Florey, and Chain shared the Nobel Prize for Medicine and Physiology for their discovery of penicillin, which completely revolutionized the treatment of infectious diseases. The discovery of penicillin emphasizes the importance of curiosity, attention to detail, and collaboration in the discovery journey. The discovery of the cause of peptic ulcers. From the 1900s to today, present day, peptic ulcers have always been attributed to stress, spicy food, and excess stomach acid. And this was the prevailing knowledge in the late 1970s when an Australian pathologist, Dr. Robin Warren, observed an unusual spiral-shaped bacterium on the surface of stomach biopsies, particularly among patients with peptic ulcers and chronic gastritis. He proposed that this bacterium, which turned out to be Helicobacter pylori, was likely a cause of peptic ulcer or a risk factor for peptic ulcer. Unfortunately, his colleagues and the medical community largely ignored his proposition, as they were still fixated on stress and spicy food as the primary cause of peptic ulcer. Fortunately, a few years later, Dr. Barrel Marshall, a resident in training in gastroenterology, became interested in Warren's work. So they decided to collaborate. Marshall then assembled patients with peptic ulcers and gastritis, while Warren conducted biopsies and that consistently showed that H. pylori was present in the stomach biopsies of these patients. They had even presented their findings at the Australian Gastroenterology Conference, but their work was completely dismissed and no one was willing to accept their hypothesis. Frustrated and angry, Marshall decided to ingest a whole culture of H. pylori. He developed symptoms of gastritis, which revealed H. pylori in a stomach biopsy done by Warren, and the symptoms thereafter resolved after he took antibacterial drugs. Ultimately, he tried to prove the Koch's hypothesis. They subsequently published their findings in the Lancet, and it was at this time that others began to pay attention to their work. Their findings were subsequently corroborated by other scientists, and about 25 years after Warren made his initial observation, Warren and Marshall won the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology in 2005 for transforming the understanding and treatment of peptic ulcer disease. The discovery of H. pylori as a cause of peptic ulcers emphasizes the necessity of challenging entrenched scientific beliefs and the importance of being bold enough to take steps for others to recognize your discoveries. Let's talk about Elon Musk, an American entrepreneur of South African descent who is a pioneer and innovator and that has transformed multiple industries. He established SpaceX to reduce the cost of space travel and to enable human colonization of a new planet called Mars. Despite 3 failed attempts and being on the verge of bankruptcy, he persevered and was able to successfully launch a reusable rocket, and this feat seemed impossible before he even attempted it. Musk also pioneered electric vehicles with Tesla, opening the door for others to follow suit. He envisioned a world with convenient high-speed underground transportation of a speed of even more than 1,200 kilometers per hour, and therefore he founded what they call the Boring Company, and this company was to create underground tunnels. He founded Solar City to advance renewable energy, and in the field of medicine he co-founded Neuralink. It's a brain-machine interface that is aimed at developing microchips which will be inserted into the human brain to communicate with computers, and holds the potential to address disease conditions such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. Additionally, he started the Starlink project using satellites to provide internet services globally, with the aim to ensure that every part of the globe has access to internet services independent of where you are based and your economic status. Elon Musk faced several challenges, including regulatory challenges and challenges related to his products and what he did, and he was also a bit very controversial to many people. But the key lessons from Elon Musk is that it's the importance of an audacious vision, relentlessly pursuing innovation, and demonstrating resilience in the face of challenges to achieve transformative and impactful achievements. Let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg, an American entrepreneur and software developer. He is a relentless digital innovator who has fundamentally transformed the landscape of social media and digital communication. Of course, we know he co-founded Facebook, which is now known as Meta platform. He started Facebook while he was attending Harvard University as an undergraduate. At that time, his purpose was to connect students at Harvard University. But within a space of 1 year, he created a platform that connected people globally. Despite facing numerous legal challenges, privacy concerns, and intense scrutiny from regulators, Zuckerberg expanded Facebook into a digital ecosystem that includes Instagram, WhatsApp, and even Oculus VR. His vision extends to creating an immersive virtual and augmented reality experiences, which is exemplified by his metaverse, a situation where there will be a metaverse where people can go to school, can do a job, can travel to. And the key lesson from Mark Zuckerberg is that the importance of visionary thinking, commitment to innovation, and resilience in overcoming obstacles to create an enduring impact on how people connect and communicate globally. Let's talk about the discovery of a new type of mpox in Bayelsa, Nigeria. In 2027, approximately 38 years after Nigeria last reported a case of mpox, formerly known as monkeypox, an 11-year-old boy was admitted into a hospital in Bayelsa State, Nigeria with a generalized fever rash illness that was later identified as mpox. Historically, mpox was an endemic zoonotic febrile rash illness in 10 African countries, primarily affecting children in rural areas and particularly those under the age of 15 years. However, something unusual happened in Bayelsa during the 2017 outbreak. Instead of predominantly affecting children, we are seeing new cases among young adults who are urban dwellers, primarily male or predominantly male. Remarkably, these young adults presented with genital ulcers and skin lesions that clustered around the genital area. Another significant finding we made at that time was the adverse association between mpox and HIV, and this was the first time in history that mpox was being linked to HIV. Based on this observation, we made two hypotheses. The first was that there's a chance that mpox could be spread via sexual contact, and the second was that there was an association between mpox and advanced HIV. Of course, our hypothesis faced significant skepticism. Many experts doubted the possibility of a zoonotic disease being transmitted sexually, with some asserting that they have decades of studying mpox and it was impossible and not believable that mpox could be transmitted via a sexual route. When we even attempted to publish our findings, it was met with rejection and criticism, and one even labeled that we are being reckless by suggesting that mpox could be transmitted via sexual contact. Fortunately, between 2019 and 2022, two journals accepted our publication. Fast forward to 2022, mpox was detected in Europe and America, and it was spreading amongst gay and bisexual men via sexual contact, and this corroborated our 2017 findings. This validation led to recognition by Nature Journal and inclusion in the Time 100 list in 2023. The key lesson here is the importance of remaining open-minded and being persistent in scientific inquiry, as the initial skepticism you may face can ultimately lead to significant breakthroughs when empirical evidence is strong. Here, let me also provide a summary at this stage of the discovery process. Every discovery process starts with first identifying a problem or an opportunity. Next, you conduct research to gain a better understanding of that problem, particularly knowing the existing knowledge of that topic. Then you formulate an hypothesis, you design a plan, you develop a prototype, you test and experiment, you analyze your results, you refine and iterate, you implement, and finally you document and share. Most discovery processes follow these steps, making it crucial for aspiring discoverers to understand them. Having presented examples of impactful discoveries and innovators, I would now like to summarize the mindsets that support their discoveries and the challenges that hinder the innovation process. At the core of every discovery is passion and enthusiasm. Every successful discoverer had been deeply passionate about their work and the journey leading to their discoveries. Also very important is curiosity and inquisitiveness. It was Albert Einstein that famously stated, "I have no special talents, I'm only passionately curious." Discoverers are also visionary and forward-thinking, like Elon Musk and Wright brothers. They demonstrate persistence and resilience in the face of challenges. They exhibit boldness in taking calculated risks and actively engage their creativity and imagination. And on account of this, I say they have a beginner's mindset that is open to all possibility. They are adaptable and flexible in varying circumstances. They are open to collaboration, and they leverage the skills of others and effectively communicate their findings through publication. They have critical thinking and problem-solving skills, which helps to enhance their innovation. Collectively, these mindsets fuel and inspire innovation and discovery. But there are challenges that usually hinder discovery and innovation. This includes, at the foundation, skepticism and resistance, which is a sine qua non in all discovery process. Global competition can impede progress, as multiple innovators often attempt to solve the same problem simultaneously, leading only a few to succeed. Technical and financial barriers, particularly in developing countries, pose significant obstacles to the discovery process. Additionally, misunderstanding of intellectual property can lead someone to lose their discoveries. Social, cultural, and economic factors, such as cultural beliefs and misconceptions, can also discourage innovation. For instance, the cause of Lassa fever was for long misattributed to spiritual spells until it was identified as a viral infection after 2 missionaries died. This prompted curious individuals to test their blood samples and revealed that Lassa fever was not caused by spiritual spells but was caused by viral infection. Resource limitation, educational gaps, regulatory and ethical challenges further slow the discovery process. Notwithstanding all these obstacles and challenges, which were faced in one way or the other by all discoverers, by persisting and focusing on the mindsets, we can ultimately tilt the scale in favor of a discovery. Let me summarize the key lessons from this presentation, and I will conclude with giving 5 essential takeaways for aspiring discoverers. The first is that scientific discoveries and innovations require time, effort, and passion. And this is supported by various notable quotations from innovators. For instance, Thomas Edison stated, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration," suggesting that you are required to work hard despite your inspiration. Steve Jobs said, "The only way to do a great job is to love what you do." Pablo Picasso remarked, "The inspiration exists, but it has to find you working." This highlights the importance of effort. Henry Ford also added, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." Therefore, one could argue that Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin, and Wilhelm Röntgen, who discovered X-rays, were not merely lucky, but they reaped the rewards of their hard work. Number 2, scientific facts are not immutable. Major discoveries often challenge and change them. The stories of various discoverers confirm this assertion, and I've always said that I believe that we should teach our students that scientific facts represent the beginning of knowledge and not the end. Some notable quotations from discoverers include that the most exciting phrase in science is not eureka, but that's funny. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. This highlights that experts can be wrong and that breakthroughs often come from those who challenge established views. It was Albert Einstein that stated that unthinking the respect for authority is the greatest enemy of the truth. And this suggests that we should not always be blinded by what the authorities say, but make efforts to explore knowledge ourselves. I view the discovery process as a pendulum, shifting from old to new facts. The role of a discoverer is to know when to swing this pendulum, challenging established norms and making new discoveries, just the way Warren and Marshall transformed the knowledge about the cause of peptic ulcer in attributing peptic ulcer to a bacterial organism instead of stress and spicy food. The third point, opposition and failures are common in every discovery process. Otto Clark famously stated, "New ideas pass through 3 periods," and this is important. It can't be done. It shouldn't be done. I knew it was a good idea all along, and that's what the discovery process passes through for every discoverer. Thomas Edison also exemplified this perspective when he said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And this highlights that failure is perceived differently depending on one's mindset. For many discoverers, it serves as a lesson rather than a setback. Karl Popper said, "The real value of a scientist is determined by the extent to which he has understood the opposite of his own theories." And this suggests that grasping alternate ideas enhances a scientist's knowledge and critical thinking. Galileo remarked, Doubt is the father of invention, indicating that uncertainty can lead to new ideas and innovations. I view the discovery process as a labyrinth filled with obstacles and paths. The red crosses in this image symbolizes the barriers and the failures we often encounter in our discovery journey. Sometimes we even feel as if we're in a dead end. Our responsibility is to remain undiscouraged, persevere, and treat these challenges as lessons in our journey towards discovery. The fourth takeaway is that every discovery unveils what already existed. This means that discoveries are not entirely new. Rather, we are either building on a previous observation or revealing what was already hidden, what was previously hidden. So I believe that every new discovery was already concealed, and it only takes an individual that was curious, imaginative, and persistent to bring it to light or to a reality. Albert stated that discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought. Similarly, Marcel noted, the real voyage of a discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So I argue that Alexander Fleming, who was the first to observe a mold penicillin-producing mold, he was not necessarily the first to discover a mold or even penicillin. Penicillin existed before Alexander Fleming made that observation. But unlike others, Fleming had the insight. He had the new eyes to reveal an existing knowledge. Isaac Newton also echoed this sentiment when he said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And this highlights the significance of acknowledging and learning from the contributions of others in the journey of discovery. Number 5. Without documentation, there is no discovery. Nearly all discoverers and inventors had to document their findings or patent their invention to gain recognition. Isaac Asimov stated, "The monument of a great scientist is a paper, not a building named after him." Stephen Hawking noted, "Publishing a paper is the beginning of a story that may span the globe." An anonymous writer said, "If it isn't written down, it never happened." Voltaire remarked, "Writing is a painting of the voice. Ultimately, the proof of your discovery is the paper you publish." I think the piece of advice is that persistence. Believe in what you know, what you have seen, and what you have found, and don't get discouraged by what people say. On the final word, in this presentation, I mentioned the potential to create a machine that evaporates flood water. I want to tell us that such machine already exists. Mindtech, a company that is based in the United States of America, has successfully used this machine to dry up flood waters, especially around mine sites. And this proves that it's always possible. I hope that one day someone will invent a pellet that we can put into flood waters to dry them up without harming the environment or exacerbating global warming. It's achievable if we can only imagine it. Thank you for listening.